All right, everyone. So in the last video, I was talking about position. Okay. And so position allowed you to take something and position it based on the browser itself. This is sometimes referred to as the viewport. So it can either be the top, the bottom, the right, or the left of the browser. Okay. Now that is for position fixed. There's other types of position though. Okay. One of them is called position relative. Okay. So the way position relative works is that rather than moving positioning the object based on the browser, the top, the bottom, the left and right of the browser, what it does is it takes the object and moves it from the top, the bottom, the right, or the left of the original location of the item. Okay, so here, this is exercise 11, or sorry, 10. And you can see I have a section here, and that section has an image for Fred Flintstone. And I have a little ID controlling it. And I have one for George Jetson, and I have a little ID controlling him. Okay. So this is the container. Now, this is Fred Flintstone image. What I'm going to do is position, instead of fixed, I'm going to use relative. Okay. Now, what this means is I still have top, bottom, left, and right. But rather than this being the top, this being the bottom, this is the left and the right, since this is the original location of the item, this is the top, this is the bottom, this is the right, and this is the left. Okay. So what would happen here is, let's say I do top 50 pixels. It's not going to be 50 pixels from the top of the browser. It's going to be 50 pixels from the top of where the image starts, which is here. So now that I've changed that top, it's actually going to push it down a little bit. Okay. I could also do like a negative value to pull this up. The negative 50 would go up since top normally goes down. And so actually what I'm getting here is an overlap. Okay. Another way to do this would be using the bottom command. I could do bottom. So once again, the bottom starts here. So 50 pixels from the bottom is kind of like the same as negative 50 pixels from the top. If I do 50 pixels from the left, that's going to start here because that's the left side of that particular image. So let's do 50. Okay. If I did 50 pixels from the right, rather than starting over here, it's going to start over here because that's the original location of my image. So this is the start. So 50 pixels would actually move it to the left. Okay. All right, so now what I'm going to do is move this image up. So I already have this George Jetson image. It's already got an ID applied to it. I'm going to use bottom 100 pixels, save and refresh. Oops, did I say that? Oh, I have to set it to position relative. Silly me. All right. Position relative, that means it's based on its original location, not based on the browser. 100 pixels from the bottom means it's going to start here at the bottom and go 100 pixels up, or it should break it out of its normal flow. And I save this properly. There you go. You get this nice, interesting overlap there. All right, let's do position absolute. Okay, so position fixed goes from the location, the top, left, right, and bottom is from the location of the browser. Position relative takes the item from its original start point. Position absolute, position fixed, it's based on the browser. Position relative is based on its current location. Position absolute is based on its parent. Okay. So let's take a look at this. I have this div that I've called wrapper, and I have another div inside of it called redbox. So what I'm going to do is take this wrapper and let's do position fixed. And I'm going to place it 100 pixels from the top and 100 pixels from the left side of the page. Oops, wrong. Preview the right document here. Let's preview that. Okay. So this is 100 pixels from the top. This is 100 pixels from the left. And this is the position of that wrapper, which is a yellow container. Now what I'm going to do is take the red box, which is a div or a section inside of that wrapper. Let's set that to position absolute. And I'm going to set that to 100 pixels from the top and the same 100 pixels from the left. Now, what's interesting about this is it's not based off of the top of the browser, the way that fixed is. It starts off the top of the location of its parent. Who is the parent? Well, in this case, the wrapper is the parent. Okay, this is the wrapper here. So in other words, 0 is here. So this is going to be 100 pixels from the 0 of this point and 100 pixels from this point. So when I save and I refresh, it moves in. Okay. Now, like I said, it's based off of its parent. So what that means is that if I ever move the parent, I also move the child. So if I was to come in here and move this to 200 and this to 300, everything moves along with it because it's not based off of the page or off of its original location. It's based off its wherever the parent goes. Okay. So let's see this in action. I have this div. Okay. Actually, we're going to skip over that one. I don't need that one. Let's do this one. All right, I have this container. And I have this image inside of this container. Okay, let's preview it. So this is about Pepsi. Here is the image and inside of that container. Now, what I kind of want to do is I want to move this so that it kind of overlaps here. Okay, I want to create kind of an overlap effect. So I'm going to take that Pepsi. There's a little ID called cap on it. So let's do cap. Now I could try doing a position fix, right? And let's do top, I don't know, 200 pixels, left, I don't know, 300 pixels. Okay, that's kind of getting there. Maybe 150 as opposed to 200. Now that's great and everything, except the problem is that it has to say fixed to this value. So if I ever move this, well, that doesn't really move accordingly, right? So that doesn't quite work. Okay, now, so that's not going to work. So let's try position relative. Position relative. Okay. Oops. All right, so this is position relative. What I'm going to do is change it from its original position now. So I'm going to say, okay, well, this is the top, bottom, left, and right. Let's move this from the right side over. Let's do, I don't know, 100 pixels and bottom 100 pixels. Okay. So it's kind of getting there. Maybe I can move it over a little bit more. Now this works, except there's a problem. Okay. I have all this empty space here that I don't really want. So relative is kind of this interesting thing where, like, if you actually look at the code, if I actually show the image, it kind of acts like it's still there, even though it's not. Like it's still rendering, like this is being pushed down because of this image. Like if this image wasn't there, this would all move up. But because of that image, it's pushing all this down, even though it physically isn't there anymore. So when you do a relative, unfortunately, it still gives it that space. So this ends up looking not that great. So let's do another method of this. Okay. So I want to show you guys an example of something. Let's say that this is my block and this is the bottle cap. All right. Here's what I want to happen. I want this to always stay in the same position in relationship to this. But then what I want is, well, if this moves, I want it to move with it. Because that was the problem with the fixed, is that, you know, when the size of the page moved, this moved and it didn't move this in relationship to it. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to set this as a absolute position based off of this. Okay. Now this has to have some sort of position. Okay. We want to be able to have this go up and down because this might move later on. So rather than using a fixed or a relative, instead of a fixed or an absolute, because that would be based on the parent, let's do position relative. So in other words, I want this to be able to move around. And this is going to be based off of this. Okay. So anytime you use position absolute, it will get rid of that extra space. Okay. So this is now based off of this. So this would now be the left, this would be the right, the bottom, and the top. I now want to set this to like left 0, or I actually might even do like -15, something like that. Maybe even like, I don't know, -25. And then let's move it up from the bottom, you know, I don't know, 40 pixels. Now that looks about right. And what's going to happen is if this moves, whether left or right due to margin auto, this is moving along with this. This will always stay the same distance from this, but this is allowed to move. So if I was to come in here and get rid of some of these spaces, these are break tags, and it moves up, or if I add a bunch of break tags or a bunch of spaces, it'll just move it up or down the way it should. Okay. So this is how we can use position, absolute, relative, and fixed. The last one's kind of a newer one. It's only really existed for the last couple of years, and it's called position sticky. Okay. Let me show an example of it. Let's see if I can find one. Of course, now that I need to show it to you, it's not here anymore. I don't know. Let's see. This is a good example. Okay. So see this part, right? And at the moment, this scrolls up and down, right? But then when this hits the top, then it stops scrolling, right? So it's part fixed, part relative, because it can both move, and then when it gets to a certain point, it stops moving, right? So we're gonna, they used to have to do that with JavaScript. Now we can do that with what's called position sticky. What position sticky will do is when you apply it to something, it'll be able to scroll up and down until it hits a particular location. and then it becomes fixed. Okay. So I got this page here. It's about dogs. And what I want is I want it to scroll up and down like this. But when this navigation bar hits the top, I want it to stay visible. Okay, so it should both scroll like this and it should be fixed. So what I'm going to do, I have this nav bar here, and I'm going to come into here and I'm going to say, well, nav position sticky. Okay. So when you make something sticky, you have to say when this hits a particular spot, when does it start to stick? So I'm going to say, well, when it hits the top, which is 0, that's when it should become sticky. Okay. So when I refresh, this scrolls up and down, but then when it hits the top, okay. Let's say for some reason I wanted to do that also with the poodle. I could do like class sticky. I don't want to make it 0 because then I'll get blocked by the nav bar, but maybe like, I don't know, 100 maybe. So it's just going to be that one piece of text, which might look a little awkward. Okay. What happens is when that area scrolls off the page, then it also will scroll. So since this is inside of this, when this article fully scrolls, then it will disappear again. Okay. So this is like a new thing you can do. You can use it if you want. You don't have to use it. It's just another element you can use in your layout. All right, last thing. So I mentioned before how working with when you make something a position, it's kind of like taking it and making it a layer in something like Photoshop or Photopea. Okay. So, in Photopea, I'm just going to make a document real quick. I'm just going to make a simple document that's about 500 by 500 pixels. All right. And what I'm going to do, don't worry about what I'm doing here. I'm just trying to make something so I can show it to you. This is going to be a red square. And I'm going to make a blue circle. And I'll make one more layer. And I'm just going to make a yellow circle. Okay. So the reason I showed it to you is at any point, there's all these layers and they sit on top of each other. And at any point, you can basically reorder them. So I can put the yellow circle behind the blue circle, so it changes the stacking order. I could take this blue circle and put it behind the red square, or take this yellow circle and put it behind the red square, right? So these are all things I can do. Now, what I can do in Visual Studio Code is I can play around with what's called the Z index, okay? So right now I have Bugs Bunny, Garfield, and Mickey Mouse, okay? And I've positioned all of them using absolute, which means they're all being based off the page. And if you actually preview this, you can see that they're stacking one on top of each other. So what happens is anytime you use some sort of position or float, you're breaking the item out of the normal flow. And now it's kind of in a quote unquote layer. Okay. Now, since there's no specific order, it just basically goes layer order. It just goes in whatever layer, order the layers were created. So this was made first, this was made second, this was made third. So this is on the bottom, this is on top of that, and then this is on top of all two of those. And that's what happens here. Let's say though I wanted to change that. What I could do is use the z-index. Okay, z-index is just a number. And basically what it means is that the z-index starts at the bottom at z-index 0. And then this would be z-index 1, z-index 2, z-index 3, so on and so on. Okay, so you can use any number you want, but essentially the way it works is the highest number is the one that's on top. The second highest number is the second one, and then third, and then fourth, and then so on and so on. So I'm going to set this to be a z-index of 100. I'm going to set Mickey to be a z-index of 50. And I'm going to set the Bugs Bunny to be a z-index of 10. Well, 100 is bigger than 10. 100 is bigger than 50. So Garfield should be on top. 50 is bigger than 10. So then that should be the second. And then this will be the last one. So if I go back, let's save this. And I go back. And you can see this becomes the new one, right? So it doesn't really matter what number you use. You can go by 1, 2, 3. You can go by 10, 20, 30. You can go by 5,000, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. It doesn't matter as long as one number is bigger than the other number. So maybe I'm going to come in here and make this 1,000. Well, 1,000 is bigger than 100 and 1,000 is bigger than 50. So now Bugs Bunny should be the one on top. This is 100 and this is 50. So 100 is bigger than 50. So this should be on top of that one. Or let's say I change Mickey to being 500. 500 is bigger than 100. So now this will be bigger than this, and this will be bigger than this. Okay. So once you start playing around with position, you may want certain items to be on top of another item if they happen to overlap. This is how you would do that by using the z-index. Okay.